We were less than 10 minutes from the border when my husband whispered calmly, deliberately, "Turn the car around, now." His voice wasn't urgent, not raised, no panic, no tremble, just 5 quiet words that sliced straight through the static of cartoons, juice box slurps, and the rustling of snack wrappers in the back seat. I smirked, one of those reflexes you have when something sounds like a joke but doesn't feel like one. "Why?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just stared straight ahead, unmoving, then said soft, steady, certain, "Please, just turn around." That was the moment I knew this wasn't about a forgotten charger. It wasn't about missing an exit. This was something else, something real, something dangerous. And when I finally found out why, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't forgive it. And I never looked at my parents the same way again. Before I take you deeper into this story, tell us where you are watching from. Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because what happened next, you won't believe just how far it went, and how close we came to lose everything. We were less than 10 minutes from the border when my husband whispered calmly, deliberately, "Turn the car around. Now." His voice wasn't urgent, not raised, no panic, no tremble. Just 5 quiet words that sliced straight through the static of cartoons, juice box slurps, and the rustling of snack wrappers in the back seat. I smirked, one of those reflexes you have when something sounds like a joke but doesn't feel like one. "Why?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just stared straight ahead, unmoving, then said soft, steady, certain, "Please, just turn around." That was the moment I knew this wasn't about a forgotten charger. It wasn't about missing an exit. This was something else, something real, something dangerous. And when I finally found out why, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't forgive it. And I never looked at my parents the same way again. We didn't talk for a while after that. I took the next exit as he'd asked. It curved off the highway gently, almost kindly, like the road itself was offering me a second chance I hadn't earned. The pine trees thickened around us. The highway noise faded behind. And all that remained was the low hum of our engine and the weight of what hadn't been said. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Still calm but bracing, like someone waiting for a storm that hadn't quite broken. I'd known this man for 15 years. I'd seen him handle job loss, kitchen fires, a fractured wrist, and a public tantrum at a theme park with grace. He didn't do drama. And he didn't feel fear. The kids were still behind us, half watching cartoons, half fighting over an imaginary boundary drawn down the center seat. Carter, our oldest, tried to referee as usual. Madison was poking Riley. Riley, in return, was threatening to throw his stuffed animal out the window. I kept driving. The road was narrower now, winding. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my thoughts weren't. I didn't know what we were running from, only that it was close. Too close. "Okay," I said finally, keeping my voice low. "Do you want to tell me what's going on now?" He didn't answer right away. Just shook his head slightly. "Just keep going," he said. "Drive anywhere but there." The way he said it, flat, tired, absolute, made my stomach tighten. "Is someone following us?" I asked. He shook his head again. "Not following. But something's wrong. I don't know what it is yet. I just know we can't cross that border." The kids started to notice. "Are we going the wrong way?" Carter asked. "We forgot something," I said quickly. "What did we forget?" Madison chimed in. "Nothing important," I replied, eyes still on the road. "Just something I need to fix." Riley asked if it was the snacks. No one laughed. Not even me. My husband sat still, his hand gripping the door handle, not like he was scared, but like he was holding himself in place. About 20 minutes later, he told me to take a left onto a narrow road I'd never noticed before. It wasn't on our GPS. There was no sign. Just a break in the trees and a gravel path that looked like it hadn't been used in years. I hesitated for a second, then turned. The tires crunched beneath us, dust kicking up behind the car. We drove a little further until the trees thickened again, and then he said, "Stop here." He unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out. "Stay here," he told me. Then he walked around to the back of the car and opened the trunk. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, the air suddenly feeling heavier than it should have. My heart was pounding, not loud but deep, like a drum echoing through the base of my spine. I could hear the kids still giggling behind me. I could hear birds in the trees, but all I could see was the way he moved cautiously, deliberately, like he didn't want to believe what he was about to find. He came back to my window. His face was pale, his eyes heavy. "Can you come out?" he asked. "Why, I need you to see it." I nodded, unbuckled, and stepped out slowly. The air was cool. The sunlight filtered through the trees like it didn't want to touch the ground. He walked me to the back of the car and opened the trunk again. He didn't say a word, just pointed. There it was, the red duffel bag, the one my father had handed me that morning. Smiling, casual. "Won't fit in our car," he'd said. "Can you take it?" I hadn't thought twice. Why would I? My parents had always been dramatic, disorganized, but never dangerous. That bag had gone in the trunk without a single thought. Until now. My husband unzipped it, folded back a hoodie, then another. I leaned in. At first it just looked like more clothes, a rolled-up towel, a kid's toiletry bag, but then I saw it plastic, vacuum-sealed packets, too many, hidden but not carefully. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to ask. I knew. Not vitamins, not medicine, not anything remotely legal. I stepped back. My breath caught in my throat. "They put that in our car," I whispered. He nodded. "With the kids," I said. Another nod. He didn't look at me, just kept staring at the bag like it had spoken to him. I looked up at the sky, suddenly furious that it was still beautiful, that the sun still shone, that the world kept spinning when mine had tilted. "How did you know I asked?" "I didn't," he said. "Not exactly. But when your dad handed me that bag, something felt wrong. The way they looked at us. Like it was already done. Like they were relieved." He paused. I thought maybe I was imagining it, but the closer we got to the border, the louder it got in my head. I didn't answer. I didn't cry. I just stood there in that gravel lot surrounded by trees and betrayal and tried to remember the last time I had felt safe around the people who raised me. Then I zipped the bag shut. Slowly, carefully, like it might explode. We didn't say another word as we got back into the car. I started driving again in the opposite direction this time. The kids had fallen asleep. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 and stared at the road like it was the only thing holding me together. My phone buzzed. Once, twice, then again. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I knew who it was. My mother. My father. Probably both. Probably asking where we were. If we were okay. If we'd made it. I imagined the exact moment they realized we'd never arrive. That we'd taken the bag. That something had gone wrong. And I smiled. Just slightly. Not out of triumph, but out of clarity. We turned toward their house. Not because we were going to talk, but because that bag wasn't staying with us a second longer than necessary. I pulled into their driveway, left the engine running. He grabbed the bag. I found the spare key still taped to the back of the plastic turtle statue they thought no one knew was fake. We opened the door, stepped inside, and placed the bag gently in the entryway. We didn't say anything. We didn't leave a note. We didn't need to. We closed the door, locked it, and drove away. That night, after the kids were asleep, the phone rang again. I answered. My mother's voice was bright, artificial. "Oh, honey, we were so worried. You just vanished." I said nothing. "Is everything okay?" Still nothing. Then a little quieter. "Where's the bag?" I let the silence stretch for just a second longer than comfort allowed. Then I said, "We dropped it off at your house." A pause. "If it was that important, maybe you should have taken it yourself." Her breath caught. She didn't say sorry. She didn't even deny it. She just went quiet. And I said, "Don't call again." Then I hung up. 3 days later, they showed up. No warning, no call, no text. Just the doorbell ringing like it was a normal visit, like they hadn't put a felony in our trunk and called it family. I knew it was them before I opened the door. There's a kind of pressure that builds behind a door when someone on the other side believes they're still welcome. I opened it just wide enough to step outside and closed it firmly behind me. They were standing there dressed like they were on their way to Sunday brunch. My mom smiled first. Tight. Too smooth. "We just wanted to check in," she said, as if she were delivering banana bread and not trauma. My father added, "We thought maybe we could talk. Clear the air." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at them. My silence stretched, and they started to shift uncomfortably. My mom finally said it. "We weren't sure how much you understood." There it was. The tell. The confirmation. They were here to see if they could still lie to me. I tilted my head slightly. "You mean the bag?" They didn't answer, but their stillness was loud. "You put it in our trunk," I said, "with your grandchildren in the back seat." My mother swallowed but didn't break eye contact. "We didn't think it would be a big deal," she said. "It wasn't dangerous. It wasn't going to be anything." My father stepped in then like a PR consultant stepping on a grenade. "Just something to help with some debt. That's all." We were desperate. And then the real excuse. "You wouldn't help." There it was again, the golden phrase. The reason everything they did was always someone else's fault. I didn't help. I didn't say yes. I had boundaries. So their betrayal was just logical, expected. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. I said, "You didn't just betray me. You used us. You put something illegal in our car and you used our kids as a shield." My dad blinked. My mom looked like she was about to cry, but hadn't committed to the emotion yet. "You don't mean that," she said. "We were just trying to—" "We're done," I said. "Don't call. Don't come here. You're not seeing the kids again. This is over." My mother opened her mouth. I could already hear it forming. "You're being dramatic. You'll cool off." But instead, she just said, "You'll come around. You always do." I turned, walked inside, locked the door behind me. And I thought that would be it. But they don't stop at no. A few days later, I showed up at the kids' school for pickup. I was early. I like being early. But when I got to the classroom, it was empty. I looked at the teacher confused. She smiled. "Oh, they were already picked up. Your parents said you'd ask them to." It took a moment for her words to land. And when they did, the floor shifted under me. I couldn't feel my hands. I don't remember driving. Just the blur of highway lines and my foot pressing harder and harder on the gas. I knew exactly where they were. I pulled into the driveway without knocking. The front lawn looked like a toy store had detonated on it. Balloons, candy wrappers, stuffed animals. Through the window, I saw my youngest with chocolate on his face. The older two were on the floor with my dad playing with a Lego set that probably cost more than our utility bill. My mom was in the kitchen cutting a cake. It was all too much, too staged, too intentional. I opened the door. "We're leaving. Now." The kids looked up confused. But Grandma said, "Now." I repeated. They scrambled for their shoes. "Can we bring the toys?" Carter asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Because saying no would make me the villain. And I wasn't giving them that power. As we walked out, my mom followed. "We were just trying to spend time with them," she said. "They missed us." I didn't respond. I strapped all 3 kids into the car, one buckle at a time, with shaking hands. As I closed the last door, I heard her voice behind me, sing-song, almost gentle. "They'll come back to us. They always do." She said it like it was a fact. Like it was a law of nature. That night, I didn't wait for the right moment. I didn't journal about it or consult a therapist or second-guess myself. I just sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my husband. "We have to leave." He didn't ask why. He didn't say, Are you sure? He just nodded, slowly, like he'd already been thinking the same thing. You mentioned North Carolina, I said. The office transfer. Your parents are there. I wasn't ready before, but I'm ready now. The next morning he called HR. By the end of the week, the paperwork was done. We packed up our lives in 3 days. No announcements, no forwarded mail, no goodbyes. We didn't disappear. We escaped. I used to think I was the responsible one. Not in the pays taxes, early drinks, 8 glasses of water kind of way. Though yes, that too, but in the way families silently assign roles. The calm one, the steady one, the one who never asks for too much, who smooths the tension at dinner tables, who picks up the pieces quietly when no one else notices anything broken. It wasn't a title I earned. It was a role I was born into, cast early, without audition, and without consent. Growing up, my parents were obsessed with the idea of looking fine, not being fine, looking at it. We had years where we ate cereal for dinner, where the gas got shut off midwinter, where my mom would cry behind the laundry room door and tell us it was allergies. And then we had years where they bought a new SUV, a flat screen, and threw backyard parties with too many fairy lights and too little truth. The money came and went like the weather. But the image that stayed. We were the kind of family who had 5 types of mustard in the fridge, but no actual food. I learned early not to ask too many questions. Not when we were suddenly eating hot dogs 3 nights a week. Not when mom picked up another side hustle that conveniently involved disappearing for hours. Not when dad took business trips that didn't require a suitcase or a schedule. The rule was simple: if it looks okay, then it is. Keep smiling. Keep up. Don't break the frame. I was 8 when I first heard the phrase, "If you know how to hustle, you don't need to save." My dad said it like it was wisdom. I repeated it once in class and got pulled aside by the teacher. She asked if everything was okay at home. I remember nodding so hard my neck hurt. My sister inherited the shine. That magnetic glow some people have that makes adults forgive them faster and kids follow them in line. She knew how to charm, how to distract, how to deflect. My parents adored her. It wasn't even subtle. I wasn't resentful then, not yet. I just watched, quietly. She got the expensive birthday parties, the better room, the louder applause at report cards even when her grades were worse. They said I was the serious one, said it like it was a flaw. Once during Thanksgiving, my mom said, "Your problem is you mistake discipline for personality." Everyone laughed. I did too. That's what you do when you're the responsible one. You laugh before they make it awkward. By the time I hit high school, I was running triage, helping them with their insurance forms, researching colleges for my sister, filling out FAFSA for myself because no one else remembered the deadline. I got a part-time job junior year and used the money to pay for my prom dress because my parents were in between cycles, which was their euphemism for broke. They still smiled in every photo. My mom had a particular laugh she used in public. It was light, breathy, just loud enough to sound effortless. She was good at that. And when things were good, they were good. Trips, new furniture, big gifts on Christmas. They knew how to make life feel magical temporarily. But magic with debt is just an illusion. And eventually, even the flashiest trick runs out of smoke. In my 20s, I moved out, worked 2 jobs, and slowly stopped answering every call. Not because I didn't care, but because every conversation came with a price. Can you co-sign? Can you spot us rent this month? Just until payday. My sister called once at 2 a.m. from Las Vegas, crying about losing her wallet and missing her flight. I wired her money. 2 weeks later, she posted photos from Cabo. I didn't say anything. Because I was the responsible one. I met my husband when I was 26. He was calm in a way that didn't try to fix you. He just listened, steady, thoughtful. When I told him about my parents, he didn't say, "That's messed up." He said, "You must be exhausted." I married him for a lot of reasons. That was one. We built a life slowly. No flash, No shortcuts. We bought a used car instead of a new one. Rented instead of taking out a second mortgage. Said no when we couldn't afford something even if it hurt. We made peace a priority. And I thought for a while that meant we were safe. But families like mine don't disappear. They circle, they wait. And when they do show up, it's never empty-handed. There's always a favor, a need, a story just tragic enough to make you feel heartless for saying no. It was 4 months before that road trip when it started again. My sister called crying about her son, said he was being bullied, that he wasn't fitting in at school. A therapist recommended a smaller, more nurturing environment. There was a private school, exclusive, expensive, life-changing. But they needed help with the deposit. Just the deposit. They'd pay us back. I liked the kid. I wanted to help. But I'd seen this pattern too many times. I said no. Gently. Kindly. But firmly. I'm sorry, I said. We have 3 kids. We don't do private school. I can't make that happen. The phone went cold. My mom called the next day, said she understood, said she wasn't mad, said, "Of course I forgot you have rules." That phrase stuck with me. She didn't say it like it was admirable, she said it like it was sad, like boundaries were a character flaw. Then we didn't speak for a while. Until the reunion came up. Suddenly, everyone was cheerful again. They were excited to see us. They said they'd figured things out with the school. Everything was going well. Would we still come? I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was imagining the shift. 2 days before the trip, they asked if we could take an extra bag. Our car's packed tight, Dad said. You've got the SUV, just one bag. I said yes. Because I hadn't learned yet. Because somewhere deep down, I still wanted to be seen as good. Because when you grow up being the responsible one, you learn to confuse compliance with kindness. But kindness doesn't require silence. Kindness doesn't mean putting everyone else before yourself, especially when they're handing you a red duffel bag full of risk and smiling while they do it. It wasn't until we were halfway to the border, until my husband said those 5 words, "Turn the car around. Now." That something in me finally woke up. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And when you finally learn to listen, the quiet is deafening. The house in North Carolina wasn't big. It didn't have marble countertops or a finished basement. The porch sagged a little, and the upstairs bathroom door didn't close all the way unless you jiggled the handle just right. But it was ours, and it was quiet. There was no drama humming beneath the walls. No calls from people asking for favors masked as forgiveness. The air smelled like pine and distance, and for the first time in years I could breathe without bracing for something. The kids settled in faster than I expected. Maybe faster than I did. Riley made a friend at school on day 3. Carter joined a science club that he wouldn't stop talking about. Madison painted a giant rainbow on her bedroom wall with glitter glue and stickers that didn't come off clean. I didn't stop her. I just watched. My husband's parents lived 15 minutes away. They were warm in a way that wasn't performative. His mom brought soup when one of the kids had a cold. His dad helped hang curtain rods and stayed to eat leftovers like they were gourmet. They didn't overstep. They didn't expect. And when they left, they said thank you. Not you owe us. That's when I realized how rarely I'd experienced that kind of simplicity in family. Love without strings. Support without keeping score. I still checked my phone too often. Muscle memory. I would open my inbox and brace myself for a subject line I didn't want to see. A voicemail from my sister. A passive-aggressive birthday message from my mother. But the silence stayed. For weeks. Then months. And in that silence, something started to shift. I started sleeping more deeply. Not longer, just deeper. I didn't jolt awake with panic that I'd forgotten something. I didn't grind my teeth through the night. I stopped checking the front window every time a car drove by slowly. I didn't even realize how hyper-alert I'd been until it stopped. And then one night, I was brushing Madison's hair before bed, and she looked up at me and said, "You laugh more now." I froze. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I hadn't noticed. I asked, "What do you mean?" And she said, "When we lived in the other house, you were always quiet, or tired, or not there. I wanted to defend myself, wanted to explain that I was there, I was doing everything. I was making school lunches and paying bills and emailing teachers and holding everyone's emotional weight on my back like a pack mule no one thanked. But she wasn't wrong. I was tired. I was quiet. I was there, but not present. And now she saw me, laughing, present, and I hadn't even realized it was happening. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what else I had missed while surviving. I thought about how many birthdays I'd smiled through while feeling like I might scream. How many family dinners I'd orchestrated while being picked apart like a roast. How many times have I said, "It's fine," while everything inside me was screaming, "This is not fine." And for what? To keep the peace, to preserve the family. But peace built on silence isn't peace. And a family that asks you to disappear isn't a family, it's a stage. And I was done performing. I started saying no to things, small things at first. No to last-minute PTA bake sales. No to staying late for unnecessary meetings. No guilt when I ordered takeout instead of cooking. No to over-explaining myself. And something strange happened. Nothing collapsed. The kids still loved me. My husband didn't flinch. The world kept turning. And every time I said no to something that drained me, I said yes to something that gave me back a piece of myself. I started walking every morning. Not for exercise, just to be alone with my thoughts, and the birds, and the sidewalk cracks I didn't have to fix. I made a playlist with music I hadn't listened to since college, songs I used to love, before my life was about everyone else's needs. I went to the library alone, sat in a corner, and read without checking the time. I bought a blank notebook and wrote 3 sentences that weren't for anyone but me. I remembered that I used to like spicy food, that I used to paint, I used to hum while folding laundry. It felt like coming home to a house I forgot I built. Then one afternoon, Riley came home with a school project, Draw Your Family. He handed me a crayon drawing with squiggly stick figures. And there I was, smiling, standing tall, not off to the side, not frowning, not with a phone in my hand. "Is that me?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "You look happy." And in that moment, I realized what the turning point had been. It wasn't the bag. It wasn't the move. It wasn't even my parents' betrayal. It was the decision I made afterward. To stop living like the aftermath of their choices. To start living like a person in her own right. To stop being the woman who fixes everything behind the curtain. And become the one who decides where the stage ends. Because I used to think protecting my family meant holding it all together. Now I know protecting my family means walking away from anything that threatens their peace, including people with my blood in their veins. And once I made that decision, there was no going back. It was a Tuesday. The kind of unremarkable Tuesday where the biggest decision was between laundry and groceries. The air was cool. The kids were at school, and I'd just brewed my second cup of coffee when I saw an email with the subject line, "Emergency. Please read." It was from my sister. I stared at it for a good 2 minutes. My thumb hovered over the delete button. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. Not since we'd left everything behind. Not since we chose silence over suffering. And now here she was. No greeting. No buffer. Just emergency. I opened it. The email wasn't long. But it was chaotic. Like she'd typed the whole thing in one breath. Sentences running into each other. Capital letters where they didn't belong. Words like arrested, border possession, and prison. My parents had been caught, trying to smuggle product, this time on their own. No fall guy. No one else to blame. Just them in a car full of drugs trying to cross a checkpoint in broad daylight. As if arrogance were a passport. They were being charged. Multiple counts. Possession with intent to distribute. Transport across international lines. The kind of charges that don't go away with a fine and a handshake. The kind that comes with federal prison time. Toward the end of the email, she'd written, "They need help. They're scared. Maybe a letter from you would help. You know how to talk to people. You always did. Please. They're still our parents. Still our parents." I let out a quiet breath and leaned back in the chair. For a strange moment, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. It wasn't shocking. It was confirmation. They hadn't changed. They'd learned nothing. I stared at that line, "They're still our parents," and let it roll around in my mind like a pebble in a shoe, as if biology were an eraser, as if blood were a shield. I typed 5 words. I did show up once. Then I hit send. No goodbye. No explanation. No rage. That night I told Carter. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet. He was drying dishes and I just said it like a grocery list. My parents were arrested. At the border. Drugs in the car. He stopped. Put the dish towel down. Didn't rush me. Just looked at me gently, the way only he knows how. "Do you regret not helping?" he asked. I looked out the window. The sky was dark, but the porch light flickered. I thought about the years I spent doubting myself, wondering if I was the problem, the dramatic one, the ungrateful one. I remembered how I flinched when my phone buzzed, how I rehearsed apologies I didn't owe. "No," I said. "I don't." Because this wasn't about justice. It wasn't about the law or what they deserved. It was about what I deserved, what I was finally refusing to carry. I'd spent so long believing love meant loyalty, that to love someone meant to show up no matter what, to sacrifice, to forgive, to endure. But I was wrong. Love without respect isn't love. Family without safety isn't family. What my parents called love was a leash. What they called family was a fortress with walls so high no truth could get in or out. They taught me that loyalty was silence. Those boundaries were betrayal. That if I didn't protect them, I was against them. And for years I believed it, until the moment my husband told me to turn the car around. That was the line in the sand, the point of no return. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized they never saw that moment as a warning. They saw it as betrayal, as a daughter who had finally stopped being useful. A week later, I got a voicemail from my aunt, a woman I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. She said she was calling on behalf of the family, said I was being selfish, that you don't throw away the people who raised you. I deleted it without listening to the end. And then I blocked the number. Because here's the thing, no one tells you when you finally choose peace, you'll be painted as the villain in someone else's story. When you say no more, they'll say, "How could you?" And they'll never realize it wasn't sudden. It was the final chapter in a book you tried to rewrite for years. A few months after the arrest, I took the kids to the lake near our house. We had a small picnic, PB&Js, apple slices, and some lemonade. Carter was skipping stones, and I was watching the way the light danced on the water. My daughter Evie asked me, "Mom, will we see Grandma again someday?" I took a breath. I thought about lying, about saying maybe, about leaving the door cracked open. But I didn't. "No," I said softly. "Why not?" she asked, frowning. I looked into her eyes, honest and clear and still untouched by the weight of secrets. Because not everyone who loves you knows how to keep you safe. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She nodded slowly, then reached for another apple slice. That night I cried. Not because I doubted the choice, but because I wished I'd had someone tell me that same thing when I was her age. I started therapy a few weeks later. Quietly. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a project out of it. I just needed space where I could finally hear myself think. Where I wasn't someone's daughter, someone's fixer, someone's shield. In one session, my therapist asked, "What's your earliest memory of feeling unsafe in your own home?" I froze, not because I didn't have one, but because I had too many. And they weren't loud memories. They were quiet. The way my mother closed the blinds when certain people came over. The whispered phone calls. The cash hidden behind cereal boxes. The silence after my questions. They say trauma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it tiptoes, and mine had walked beside me for decades. By fall, the trial had ended. They took a plea. 4 years. No parole for at least 2. My sister never wrote again. Part of me wondered if she'd ever understood what I was trying to do. Not punish, not abandon, but protect. Myself, my children, even her in some strange way. Maybe one day she would see that, or maybe she wouldn't. That was no longer mine to carry. What I carried now were groceries and school forms and bedtime stories. I carried my daughter when she was tired and my son when he scraped his knee. I carried love, real clean, safe love, and I carried my voice, not the one shaped by survival, the one I was still learning to trust. The town we moved to didn't have a single stoplight. That was the first thing I noticed. Just one long, sloping main street with a bakery on the corner, a tiny library that still used checkout cards, and a post office where the clerk smiled like she'd known you for years, even if she hadn't. It was the kind of place where people left their porch lights on for no one in particular. The loudest sound at night was the train passing through so far away it sounded like a ghost remembering its route. We rented a small white house with blue shutters. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a tiny yard, with overgrown mint I could never quite tame. The kids shared a room for the first few months, and to my surprise, they didn't complain. They giggled at night, built forts out of sheets, and made up rules about who got which pillow when. It felt quiet. But not the kind of quiet that makes you uneasy like someone's holding their breath. This was different. This was a quiet that filled you, not surrounded you. A quiet that felt like permission. For the first time in my life, I could hear myself think. There were no sudden knocks on the door at midnight, no coded phone calls, no anxiety that walked in wearing someone else's shoes. Carter found work doing freelance design logos, book covers, and the occasional full brand package for local shops trying to look modern. He set up a desk by the window that faced the street and started making coffee every morning at 6:30, just so I could sleep a little longer. He never said it aloud, but I saw it in the way he moved, gentle, unhurried, as if life had finally slowed to match the rhythm of his kindness. The kids started at a small public school where the principal wore cowboy boots and knew every student by name. Evie joined the art club. Jack got picked for the safety patrol, which made him beam with responsibility. And Max, the youngest, just wanted to read books about dinosaurs and make volcanoes out of baking soda. They were happy. Not the loud, sugar-high kind of happy, but the steady, rooted kind. And every time I watched them run barefoot across the backyard or help each other zip up coats on cold mornings, something in me unclenched. A knot I didn't know I'd been carrying slowly came undone. I remember one afternoon I was folding laundry in the living room, the kind of chore that used to make me feel invisible, like I was folding pieces of a life that no one saw. But now the sunlight poured in through the windows, warm, golden, clean. The washer hummed softly. A bird chirped outside. And for no reason at all, I started crying. Not because I was sad, but because I wasn't. I was finally safe enough to feel safe. I'd spent so many years bracing for the worst that I'd forgotten what it was like to exhale without fear. I'd forgotten what it felt like to live in a house that didn't have secrets behind every door. Then one morning it came back. Not danger, but memory. I was sipping coffee in the cafe on Main Street. I liked the corner table, the one near the bulletin board where neighbors posted about piano lessons, yard sales, and missing cats. A bell above the door rang whenever someone came in, and that day it rang twice. A man walked in, nodded at the barista, and grabbed a newspaper from the rack near the window. He sat at the table beside mine. I didn't pay much attention until I glanced at the front page. And there they were. My parents. Black and white mugshots side by side above a headline that read, "Sentencing announced in border drug smuggling case." I froze. The man noticed me looking and nodded toward the paper. "Wild story, huh?" I gave a small neutral smile, the kind you give when you don't want to lie but can't afford the truth. They got 4 years no parole, he said. Thought they were untouchable, I guess. He went back to his coffee. I went back to breathing. 4 years. Not long enough to undo what they'd done, but long enough for me to stop looking over my shoulder. I didn't take the paper. I didn't even ask to read it. I didn't need to. I already knew how that story ended, or rather, how mine had begun. That afternoon, I walked the long way home, past the school, past the library, past the church with the creaky bell tower that only rang on Sundays. And I thought about how much of my life had been built around waiting, waiting for them to call, waiting for them to need me, waiting for the next crisis, waiting to be good enough to make them stop. But the waiting was over. I hadn't forgiven them. I probably never would, but I wasn't trying to anymore. And that more than anything felt like healing. That night, Carter and I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket sipping tea. The kids were asleep, the moon was bright, the mint in the garden rustled softly in the breeze. I saw the article, I said. He didn't ask which one. 4 years, I added. He nodded. You okay? I thought about it. Then I said, I think I'm learning how to be. I think I'm learning how to be. That was the truth. But learning doesn't mean the past stops whispering. Some nights I'd wake up with the taste of salt on my tongue and the sound of metal slamming in my ears. No sirens, no shouting. Just that particular silence that follows chaos, the kind I grew up memorizing. Carter would stir beside me, groggy, one arm reaching instinctively around my waist like an anchor. I'd lie there in the dark listening to my breath, reminding myself this is a different house. These are different walls. You're safe now. Some memories have sharp edges. You can box them up, tape them shut, shove them to the back of your mind, but one wrong sound, one unexpected phrase, and they slice right through. It happened one Thursday afternoon in late October, parent-teacher conference day. The gymnasium smelled like pencil shavings and plastic chairs. Max's teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Lang, showed me crayon drawings taped proudly to the wall. Jack's math scores were rising. Evie's art portfolio was chosen for the district showcase. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. Then, just as I was gathering their backpacks and coats, a voice called out gently from behind me. Excuse me, dear, are you Nancy's daughter? I turned. An older woman, wispy white hair, kind eyes, holding a tray of cookies. She must have been on the PTA, or maybe a retired volunteer. There was no malice in her question, just curiosity, a neighborly instinct. Sorry, I asked, already knowing. Nancy and Ron, your mother and father. They used to summer here years ago, didn't they? I could have sworn you looked like her. My mouth went dry. There was a time I would have laughed politely, dodged the question, said something vague like, small world, or, I get that a lot. But not this time. Not anymore. I looked the woman in the eye and said, I don't have a mother. Her face shifted confusion first, then quiet apology. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I didn't mean. It's okay, I said quickly. You didn't know. She reached out, touched my arm softly. Whatever happened, I'm sure she loved you. I gave her a small smile. One I didn't mean. Maybe. But love isn't always safe. She nodded slowly, like someone who understood more than she let on. Then she offered me a cookie, and I accepted it out of reflex. I walked home with the kids, their voices dancing around me, Evie excitedly recounting her art critique, Max telling a story about a worm he found at recess. My body was there, my mouth responded, but my mind was back in that gym, staring into a face that didn't know how dangerous kindness could be. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat on the porch again. Same blanket, same tea, same moonlight. Carter joined me a few minutes later. Said nothing at first, just sat down beside me and waited. Finally, I said, Someone asked me if I was Nancy's daughter today. He turned slightly quiet, watchful. I told her I don't have a mother. He didn't flinch, didn't look surprised. Instead, he said, "That's the first time you've said that out loud, isn't it?" I nodded. It felt true, but I hated saying it. "You can mourn someone," he said, "even if you're better off without them." I looked at him. Is that what this is? Mourning? He thought for a moment. Maybe. Or maybe it's reclaiming your story, saying it in your own words, not theirs. We sat in silence after that, the kind of silence that holds space instead of stealing it. And I realized something. Turning the car around wasn't the end of the road. It wasn't a retreat. It wasn't an escape. It was survival. It was me finally choosing to unlearn everything I was raised to believe, that loyalty requires silence, that love excuses everything, that pain, if it's familiar, must be safe. It was me rewriting the story from the middle without needing permission, without needing them to understand or approve. And it was in that silence, in that tiny rented house with blue shutters and a backyard full of mint, that I began to feel whole. Not because I had all the answers, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of asking the questions. It came on a Tuesday, thick envelope, no return address, but I knew. I stood in the kitchen holding it like it might explode. The kids were at school. Carter was upstairs fixing the broken curtain rod in Evie's room. Outside, the mail truck hummed on to the next house. Inside, the clock ticked too loudly. I didn't open it. Not right away. I placed it on the counter next to the fruit bowl and walked away. I did the dishes, water scalding, scrubbed the same plate 3 times. I folded laundry. Jack's hoodie, Evie's leggings, Max's socks, tiny pieces of the life I had chosen, the life I had built, the life I'd bled for. The envelope just sat there, watching, waiting. By 3:10, the kids tumbled through the door with backpacks, crumbs, and stories. I smiled, asked about their days, cut up apples, hid the envelope in the junk drawer. Later, after bedtime routines and sleepy kisses, I poured a glass of wine and brought it back out. Carter looked up from the couch. He saw it in my hand and didn't ask. He just turned off the TV. I sat across from him and slowly peeled back the flap. The first thing I noticed, my mother's handwriting. Still sharp, still perfect, still controlled. The second thing I noticed, there were 3 pages, front and back. I read the first line aloud. "Dearest Ava, I know I have no right to write to you." Carter leaned forward slightly, said nothing. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I owe you an explanation." I stopped. My throat tightened. I looked up at him. "Do I keep going?" "That's your choice," he said. "But you don't have to protect me from it." So I kept reading. She wrote about the early days, how they met, how she fell in love with my father because he was dangerous, exciting, how she thought being feared meant being respected. That pain was power. She didn't call it abuse, she called it survival. She said she didn't know how to love, not properly, because no one had ever loved her without conditions. She said she was sorry for all of it, but especially for teaching me to mistake obedience for love. She wrote about my childhood, how I was so quiet, so perfect, and how that scared her more than anything. She said she watched me slip away after every fight, every lie, every slap. And then she wrote this: "I knew you were leaving us long before you did. I felt it. The day you packed your children into that car, I knew you wouldn't come back." I wasn't angry. I was relieved. You did what I never dared to do. I stopped again. Carter handed me a tissue I didn't realize I needed. The second page was about my father, how he grew crueler over time, how he hated the way I looked at him like he wasn't God, how he'd planned to fix things, to make sure I didn't testify, how he never forgave me for choosing outsiders over blood. She wrote, "I know what he did. I know what he almost did." My skin turned cold. She didn't say what. Not exactly. But I remembered the way he showed up at Evie's daycare that week before we left. Said he was just checking in. The staff had called me immediately because he wasn't on the pickup list. I had told myself it was a coincidence, that he hadn't meant harm. But now even that illusion crumbled. He would have taken her, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. He would have used her to bring me back. Carter didn't speak, but his jaw clenched. The last page was shorter. I am serving my sentence, she wrote. I won't fight it. I won't ask for your forgiveness. But if one day you need answers, I will give them. If one day you want to see me, I will be here. And if not, I understand. I only ask one thing. Don't let him take my name from your story. Let people know I was there even if I failed you. She signed it. Love always, Mom. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. We sat in silence for a long time. Then Carter said, How do you feel? I searched for a word. It wasn't rage. I'd felt that before and it burned hot. This felt colder, deeper, like someone had just described my past better than I ever could, and that was its kind of violence. She's still trying to write the story, I said. Even now. You don't have to read another word of it, he said. I know I said. But I did. I didn't respond to the letter. Not because I hated her, not because I was above it, but because there are some wounds that letters can't stitch. That night I placed it in a box. Not to forget, but to remember on my terms. And when I turned out the lights and slipped into bed beside my husband, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just exhaled. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a daughter at all. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset. Not exactly. It was quieter than that. Like standing outside your childhood home in the dark, knowing the people inside aren't yours anymore, but your name is still on the mailbox. At 3:00 a.m., I found myself in the kitchen barefoot on cold tile holding the letter again. Not reading it. Just holding it. Like the paper itself could tell me something more if I waited long enough. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a second message between the lines. Some confession hidden in the margins. Or maybe I was just looking for the girl I used to be, the one who thought a hug from her mother could fix anything before she learned that arms could be both shelter and trap. I stood there so long I forgot I was holding my breath. And then, without warning, I remembered the garden. I must have been 5, maybe 6. It was early spring. My mother had dragged me outside in a too thin sweater and showed me how to dig a trench for tulip bulbs. Her hands were always clean, surgically clean, but that day she plunged them into the dirt like she belonged there. She said, "Flowers don't bloom from air, Ava. They need pressure, cold, darkness. Only then do they rise." She looked at me and added, "It's the same with girls like you." At the time I thought it was beautiful. Now I realize it was a curse dressed up as poetry. That night in the kitchen, I whispered that line to myself. It's the same with girls like you, and something in me broke loose. Not a scream, not a sob, just a slow, silent ache that spilled down my cheeks before I could stop it. I wiped my face and looked out the window into the dark yard. And for the first time in a long time, I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. Who am I if I'm not her daughter I didn't know yet? But I knew I wanted to find out. The next morning, Carter brewed the coffee a little stronger than usual. He handed me a mug without a word, then sat across from me at the table. "You want to talk about it?" "No," I said. "But I probably should." So I told him about the memory, the garden, the bulbs, the line. He didn't interrupt, just listened. One hand wrapped around his cup, the other resting on the table like he was holding space for me. When I finished, he said, "That's not love, that's control with lipstick." I laughed short and sharp. I used to think they were the same. "I know," he said, "but they're not." Then he told me something I hadn't expected, something he'd never shared before. When I was a kid, he said my dad used to call my mom his lighthouse, said she kept him from crashing. She was soft, gentle, the kind of woman who wrote notes in your lunchbox and cried at the end of Pixar movies. Sounds like a Hallmark card. He smiled. She was, and I used to think she was weak. That surprised me. I thought strength meant being loud, unshakable, stern, like your mom. I raised an eyebrow. But now he continued. Now I think strength looks more like you. You left. You protected our kids. You're still standing. That quieted me. In the best way. A few days later, I found myself at the park with the kids. The sky was clear. The air smelled like cut grass and chalk dust. Evie was climbing a jungle gym. Max was chasing butterflies. Jack was trying to bury one of his shoes in the sand like a time capsule. And me, I was watching them and realizing something I hadn't dared admit. They don't know her. They don't know the woman who held my hand too tightly, who measured love in grades and posture, and the tone of your voice when guests were over. To them, Grandma is a name on a page I never turned. And maybe that's okay. Maybe breaking the cycle means allowing some stories to stay untold. I'm not saying I've forgiven her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm starting to accept that I don't have to carry her legacy like a shackle. I can remember what she was without letting it define who I am. I can open the box when I'm ready and close it again without guilt. I can let the letter exist. And I can choose not to write back. Because sometimes survival looks like silence. Sometimes healing sounds like nothing. Just the wind. Just your breath. Just the soft laughter of children who will never learn that love is earned through obedience or silence or fear. And that's enough for me. It started with a shoebox. Jack had found it in the back of my closet while looking for his dinosaur puzzle, the one with the missing tailpiece that's somehow more valuable because it's incomplete. Mom, he said, dragging it out like treasure, what's in here? My first instinct was to say nothing. But kids know. They always know. It's like they're born with radar for the things we try to bury. So I sighed, sat down cross-legged on the bedroom floor and opened it with him. Photos. A few old cards. A torn movie ticket. A faded recipe card with a lipstick print on the corner. His eyes widened. Who are these people? I looked at the photo in his hand. I at 16 in a dress that was too stiff and a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. My mother is behind me, her hands on my shoulders, her smile practiced. That's Grandma, I said before I could stop myself. He tilted his head. Your mom? Yeah. His brows knitted. But where is she? A simple question, and yet it made my mouth go dry. She's not around anymore. Did she die? That word so final hung between us. No, I said quietly. She didn't die. Then why don't we see her? Evie had appeared in the doorway now, her arms folded, eyes curious but cautious. Max followed, still holding a half-eaten granola bar. The room was filled with quiet tension. Not the scary kind. The waiting kind. The kind that feels like standing at the edge of a pool, deciding whether to jump in. I took a deep breath. There are some people in life I began choosing each word with the precision of a surgeon who don't know how to love without hurting. And sometimes, when someone like that is your parent, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. They didn't say anything at first. Evie sat down beside me, legs folded, and picked up another photo. Did she hurt you? I nodded. Yes. Did she hurt us? I smiled gently. No. I made sure she never got the chance. Max crawled onto my lap, squishing the photos a little. But she's still your mommy, right? I hesitated. She's the woman who gave birth to me, I said. But being a mommy, that's more than just being there at the beginning. It's about showing up over and over even when it's hard. Like you, Jack said simply. And that right there was enough. Later that evening, I told Carter about the shoebox talk. He was chopping vegetables, the kids were watching a movie, and the air smelled like rosemary and garlic. They asked if she died, I said, and for a second I wished I could have said yes. He paused, knife hovering midair. But you didn't. No. I told them she's alive. Just not here. He nodded slowly as if understanding more than I said aloud. You did the right thing. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me feels like I opened a door that can't be shut now. Maybe that's okay. I raised an eyebrow. Maybe they don't need a door shut. Just someone who can walk them through what's behind it. Safely. He said it so gently, like it was obvious. A week later, we took a trip to the coast. It wasn't planned. Just one of those spur-of-the-moment decisions you make when the weather's right and life feels too small for its walls. The beach was quiet, off-season, windy enough to whip the hair from your face but not so cold it bit your bones. The kids ran wild, barefoot and unbothered, while Carter and I sat on a driftwood log, passing a thermos of hot chocolate between us. I've been thinking, I said, watching Jack chase a seagull like he had a chance of catching it. Dangerous, Carter teased. I smiled. About what the kids asked. About my parents. He waited. I spent so long trying not to become her that I forgot. Not becoming her isn't the same as knowing who I am. That makes sense. I want to give the kids more. Not the ugly details. Just the truth. That it's okay to come from something broken and still build something whole. He reached for my hand. You already have. I looked at our kids laughing, shouting alive in a way I never was at their age, and I believed him. For the first time in a long time, I believed him. That night, as we tucked the kids into bed, Evie asked for a story. Not a fairy tale. Not a book. One from when you were little, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. Carter looked at me from the doorway, his hand resting on the light switch. A silent, "Your call." So I sat on the edge of her bed and began. There was a little girl who lived in a house where everything looked perfect, I said. The table was always clean, the laundry was always folded, the cookies are always in the jar. But she was scared, all the time. Evie blinked. Why? Because in that house, love wasn't about hugs or bedtime stories. It was about rules, about doing everything right, and even when she did, it still wasn't enough. Did she leave? Jack asked from his bunk above. I nodded. When she got big enough, and brave enough, she left. Was it hard? Very. There was a pause. But she did it anyway, Max said as if finishing the story for me. Yeah, I whispered. She did. Later in our room, Carter wrapped his arms around me. I hadn't realized I was shaking until he held me still. You were that little girl, he said. I nodded. You're not her anymore. Another nod. But she's proud of you. I think she always hoped you'd make it out. That made me cry. Quietly. The kind of cry that doesn't break but cleanse. Weeks passed. Spring arrived in bursts, pink blossoms, wet sidewalks, and sunlight that lingered like an old friend. One afternoon, while organizing the garage, I found another box. This one was labeled in my father's handwriting. Ava, high school. I froze. I almost put it back. But something stopped me. Maybe curiosity. Maybe closure. Maybe just the quiet thought I get to decide what stays. Inside were old yearbooks, notes from friends, a sketchbook I'd forgotten existed, and then tucked between a chemistry notebook and a graduation program. A letter. From my dad. It was never mailed. Dated a year after I left. I read it on the floor legs, numb heart, louder than my breath. He wrote, Ava. I don't know if you'll ever read this. I'm not sure I deserve to send it. But I'm sorry. I knew more than I let on. I saw things I didn't stop. And by the time I wanted to speak up, you were already gone. I hope wherever you are, you're safe. I hope you have the kind of life I never gave your mother. And I hope one day, if you ever forgive me, it's not for me, but for you. Dad. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it. Not to keep it hidden, but to keep it safe. Some wounds don't close, but some, they fade just enough to let the light in. That night I told Carter. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just told him. And he asked, what will you do with it? I'm not sure, I said, but I think I'll show the kids one day. Why? So they know that forgiveness isn't forgetting, and love doesn't always come packaged right, but you can still choose better. You can always choose better. He kissed my temple. You already have. And for the first time since that drive near the border, I felt it. Not relief, not triumph, but peace. Not perfect, but mine. It was late. The kind of late where the house breathes differently when everything is quiet, but not quite still. The refrigerator hums. The trees shift against the windows. The world forgets to be noisy. And I couldn't sleep. So I got up, padded to the kitchen, and made a cup of tea I wouldn't finish. I passed the living room, glanced at the family photos on the shelf, Evie with her front teeth missing, Jack in a cardboard dinosaur costume, Max asleep on Carter's chest, drooling on his shirt. This life, this imperfect, chaotic, beautiful life, it had cost me something, and tonight I felt it again, heavy in my chest. So I sat down at the dining table, pulled out a pad of paper, and began to write. Not because I planned to send it. Not because I thought she'd ever read it. But because I needed to say things out loud on paper, at least to put shape to the ache I'd carried for so long. I wrote, Dear Mom. I've rewritten this first sentence too many times. I don't know how to begin. And maybe that's fitting because that was always the problem with us, wasn't it? We never knew how to start. You once told me that silence was strength, not reacting was power. Those emotions were messy and weakness lived in softness. And I believed you. For too long I believed you. I believed you when you said crying made me manipulative, when you said I needed to toughen up, when you called me dramatic for needing a hug after school, or selfish for asking if you were proud of me. I believed you when you said you yelled because I didn't listen fast enough. That slamming doors was just how you expressed urgency. That disappointment was your way of teaching me excellence. But now as a mother myself, I look at my daughter at Evie, and I can't imagine calling her weak for having feelings. I can't imagine ignoring the way her hands shake when she's scared, or telling her that needing comfort is something to be ashamed of. And suddenly, I see it. I see the cycle. And I see how hard you must have worked to normalize it, to survive your pain by wrapping it in logic and calling it love. But here's the thing, Mom, I'm not angry at you anymore. I'm tired. And underneath that tiredness is grief. Not just for what I went through, but for what you must have too. I don't write this letter to accuse. I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just want you to know. I left because I had to. I had to, or I wouldn't have survived intact. I had to, or I wouldn't have known that a mother can raise her voice without fear in it. That she can hold her children without needing to fix them. That she can say I'm sorry without losing power. That softness and strength can exist in the same breath. You didn't teach me that, but you taught me what it looks like when that's missing. And somehow, that was enough. So thank you. Thank you for the cold because it taught me to build warmth. Thank you for the distance because it showed me how to stay close. Thank you for being the beginning of a story I chose to finish differently. I don't forgive everything, but I understand more now. I don't need you to say sorry, but I needed to stop carrying this silence. This is me laying it down. This is me closing the door gently, without slamming it, without shouting, without shame. This is me walking forward. Love, Ava. I put the pen down. The kitchen clock ticked once, and I just sat there, not crying, not shaking, not angry, just still. It felt like placing a stone on the ground after miles of carrying it in my pocket. Fan ne quang 1002. Mình sẽ tiếp tục fan còn lại của part 8 ngay sau đây để đủ 2.000 từ. Dưới đây là phần còn lại của part 10. The letter I never sent, hoàn chỉnh khoảng 2.000 từ. I folded the letter carefully, not to keep it, but to say goodbye to it. A final gesture for something never meant to arrive. I opened the back door. The night air kissed my skin with the kind of cold that made you feel real. The moon hung low, big and unbothered, watching over everything like a patient old friend. I stepped into the yard barefoot, the grass cool beneath my soles. I lit the corner of the paper with a kitchen match. The flame caught instantly, orange and alive, It curled, the edges darkened. The words turned memories into smoke. I stood there until nothing remained but a little pile of ash in the fire-safe dish I'd brought out with me. And just as I turned to go back in, I heard the soft creak of the screen door. Evie. She stood in the doorway, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders, curls messy with sleep. "Mom," she whispered. I didn't hide the dish. I didn't hide my face. "Yes, baby." She walked toward me, said nothing. She looked at the ash, then at me, then sat down beside me in the grass and leaned against my arm. No questions, no fear, just presence. And in that moment, something inside me settled. The little girl I used to be. I think she saw us, sitting there in the moonlight, my daughter, my life, my peace. And she smiled. Back inside, Evie fell asleep on the couch before I could tuck her in again. I watched her for a while, heart full and aching in the same beat. And I realized this is the legacy I want to leave. Not money, not perfection, but softness, truth, a way forward. I placed the last of the ash into the fireplace the next morning and swept it clean. It was over. Not the memory, but the weight. And somehow in the quiet aftermath of letting go, I felt stronger than I ever had holding on. The envelope came on a Thursday. No return address. Just my name handwritten in a neat looping script I hadn't seen in over a decade. Ava L. That was all. Inside was a folded piece of ivory stationery with gold trim and a faint scent of perfume. I didn't need to open it to know where it came from. But I did anyway. The note was short. "We're having a family reunion this Saturday at the old house. If you'd like to come, it starts at 2. Mom." No emotion, no apology, no warmth, just logistics. And yet I read it twice, then 3 times. Carter found me at the kitchen table still staring at the note like it might change if I blinked long enough. He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" I handed it to him, watched his eyes narrow. Seriously, I nodded. "Yep." He slid into the chair across from me. "So, are you going?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. Part of me wanted to ignore it, toss it into the trash and pretend it never came. But another part, something deep unsettled, needed closure. Not revenge, not reconciliation, just truth. "I'm thinking about it," I said. He didn't hide the tension in his shoulders. "Do you want me to come with you?" I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. Saturday came with gray skies and drizzle. I didn't wear anything dramatic, just jeans, a soft sweater, and a jacket that smelled faintly of lavender. Something about the quietness of it felt appropriate. As I drove, I passed familiar places that had once held memories, now just scenery. The bookstore where I used to browse on Friday afternoons. The small diner with the cracked window where Dad always ordered black coffee. The corner park with the broken swings. Time hadn't stopped here, but it hadn't moved forward either. Just existed. The house came into view just after 1:30. I parked a block away, not because I was hiding, but because I needed a moment to breathe. It looked almost the same, with white siding, green shutters, and the porch still crooked on the left side. But the lawn was unkempt now, and one of the upper windows was boarded over. There were no balloons, no music, no cars in the driveway. My stomach turned. I walked up the path anyway. Each step was a negotiation. Each breath is a decision. At the front door, I paused, then knocked. Silence. I knocked again. Nothing. I tried the handle. It turned. Inside, the house smelled musty. Old wood and rain and time. The furniture had been moved around. Dust covered most surfaces. No voices. No laughter. Just one thing on the dining table. A photograph. Framed in silver, tarnished with age. It was of me at 16, in a graduation gown, standing stiffly between my mother and father. I remembered that day. How I'd smiled too hard. how their hands never touched my shoulders. Next to it sat a small envelope. My name is on it. Again. I opened it slowly. Inside, didn't expect you'd show. We've moved on. Take whatever you left behind. Mom. That was it. No signature, no explanation, just a note that said in essence you are not part of this family. I stood there for a long time, looking at that photograph. In the absence of everything I used to want so badly, I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I didn't even sigh, I just placed the photo back on the table, turned around, and walked out. Outside, the drizzle had stopped. The air was cool, almost sharp. I strolled back to the car, past the houses, the diner, the park, and somewhere between that boarded-up window and the corner stop sign I felt it. The final weight leaves my chest, because now I knew. I had not left a family. I had escaped a fiction. And what I had built my children, my marriage, my peace was real. It was mine, and no one could erase it. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I pulled into the overlook on Crescent Ridge, the one Carter and I used to visit before we got married, before we had kids, before everything got complicated. From there you could see the whole valley, the river curling like a ribbon of glass, the rooftops clustered in tidy rows, and the clouds rolling low, soft, and gray. I rolled down the windows and let the wind in. It was quiet, a real, unforced kind of quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I sat with it, without needing to fix it, without needing to fill it. I took out my phone, hovered over the text thread labeled Mom, and hit delete. I did the same with Dad. And then with Home, which I realized was a mislabel. It had never been that. By the time I returned, it was after dark. Carter met me at the door. He didn't ask what happened. He just opened his arms and I stepped into them. No words, just breath and closeness and understanding. Later we sat on the couch, Evie curled between us, fast asleep again, her head on my shoulder. I told him everything. The empty house, the note, the photograph. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, really listened the way people do when they know there's no fixing it, only witnessing. When I finished, I said I thought I might feel broken after that. He looked at me. But you don't, he said. I shook my head. No, I feel free. The next morning I took the kids for pancakes, just me and them. Carter stayed back to fix the gutters, he said. But I think he knew I needed time. At the diner, the kids argued over who got the chocolate chip smiley face pancake. I ordered black coffee and bacon and didn't bother correcting their syrup puddles. Evie leaned her chin on her hand and looked at me. Mom. Yeah. Are we ever going to see Grandma again? I looked at her. My wise, clear-eyed child. No, I said softly. I don't think so. She nodded slowly. Okay. And that was that. That night I tucked them in one by one. Kisses on foreheads. Extra blankets. A story about a fox who built her den when the forest got too cold. Then I sat down at my desk and opened a new journal. I wrote 3 things at the top of the page. I am not what they said I was. I am not what they made me feel. I am not theirs anymore. Then I closed the journal and turned out the light. Some stories don't end with fireworks or final confrontations. Some stories end quietly with an empty house, a discarded note, and the realization that you survived it all. And sometimes that's more than enough. It didn't happen all at once. Healing, I mean. There was no music swelling in the background, no profound sunrise moment. Just a string of small things, ordinary, forgettable, even that slowly rewrote the shape of my days. Like the first time I made tea and didn't check my phone. Or the morning I realized I hadn't thought about my mother in a week and didn't feel guilty about it. Or the Tuesday I laughed, really laughed at something Carter said while folding laundry and the sound startled even me. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, it was quiet, steady, and mine, and it was living. I went back to teaching part-time, not at a big school. Just a community workshop at the library, creative journaling and narrative therapy for women who needed to find their voice again. Most of them didn't say much at first. They'd sit with folded arms and cautious eyes, unsure if it was safe to say the truth out loud. But slowly, one sentence at a time, they started to open. "I don't know who I am anymore. He said I was too emotional. I just want to feel like I matter." I didn't try to fix them. I just listened. And every time one of them cried or swore or laughed unexpectedly, I felt this warm ache in my chest, like I was watching pieces come back together, not just theirs, but mine too. One day after class, a woman named Renata stayed behind. She was in her late 50s, always wore navy, and spoke with the kind of softness that made you lean in to hear. She handed me a folded sheet of paper. I wrote something, she said, but I'm not ready to read it out loud. I nodded. "Can I?" She hesitated, then nodded. I unfolded the page. It was a letter to her younger self, and in it she said, "You did not deserve the silence. You did not deserve the shame. And even though they never said they were sorry, you survived them." I looked up. Renata was crying, and so was I, because she didn't know it, but she'd written something I had never been able to say to myself. Until now. Evie turned 8 that spring. We had a picnic in the backyard. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches, lemonade, and a sheet spread out under the oak tree. At one point, she turned to me with her mouth full of frosting and said, "Mom, you look happy." I paused. "Do I?" She nodded. "You smile more now, like, for real." And in that moment, surrounded by half-eaten cupcakes and dandelion weeds, I realized she was right. I did smile more. Not because everything was perfect, but because I wasn't pretending anymore. One evening, months later, I received another letter. This one had a return address. It was from my mother. I held it in my hands for a long time before opening it. Inside, she wrote, "I heard you came. I wasn't ready. I'm not sure I ever will be, but I'm glad you're okay. Mom." There were no promises, no real answers, just a brittle attempt at something resembling acknowledgement. I didn't write back, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need her voice to validate mine anymore. I took the letter, folded it in half, and tucked it between the pages of my journal, not as a keepsake, but as a marker of where I'd been and where I refused to return. That summer, we planted wildflowers. Evie wanted tulips, but I explained that those bloom in spring. So we compromised coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, and a patch of lavender along the fence. The kids helped dig the holes. Carter laid mulch. I labeled the rows with handwritten popsicle stick signs. There was something tender about it. Not just the act of planting, but the idea that beauty could grow again. Right here. Right in the space where so much had been lost. One morning, I stood barefoot on the porch, a cup of tea in my hands, and watched the breeze ripple through the petals. It was quiet. No door slamming behind me. No phone buzzing with accusations. No performance to maintain. Just the soft rustle of leaves. And me. Alive. Later that year, I wrote a short piece for a local magazine. It was titled, "The Cost of Being the Good Daughter." They printed it without edits. The emails came slowly at first. Women mostly. Some men. Strangers who'd read it and written to say, "This is my story too." One line got quoted again and again. "I mistook loyalty for love and silence for strength." It was true. I had worn silence like armor, thinking it made me noble. But it only made me disappear. And now that I had words, I used them. Not to hurt, not to shame, but to witness, to reclaim, to say I was there. And I am here. And I lived. We went to the lake that fall, just the four of us. We rented a tiny cabin with chipped paint and mismatched dishes. There was no cell service, no distractions, just puzzles, hot cocoa, and a fireplace that required actual matches. One night, Carter and I sat out on the deck, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars come out one by one. He reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. I looked at him. He meant it. Not the way people say it after a graduation or a work thing. He meant it in that quiet, sacred way someone sees the battle behind your smile. I didn't respond right away, just leaned my head against his shoulder and whispered, "Thanks for turning the car around." And he smiled, "Thanks for trusting me when I did." We stayed like that for a long while, just breathing in the night, no need to speak. Eventually, I went inside and checked on the kids. Evie was sprawled across her bunk like a starfish. Theo had drooled on his pillow. Miles was curled up with his flashlight still on, pointed at the last page of a book he'd already read 3 times. I stood in the doorway watching them, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid I'd become my parents. Because I already hadn't. So if you ask me what happened after that drive, after that moment, 10 minutes from the border, I'll tell you this. I turned around, but I didn't go back. I drove forward into the unknown, into the quiet, into the life I wasn't supposed to choose. And in that life, I found something I didn't even know I needed. Not revenge, not validation, but freedom. And then I lived. Not the life they planned for me, not the one I broke myself trying to earn, but the life I built with both hands after I let go of theirs. A life with room to breathe, room to grow, room to be me, just me. And that was more than enough. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.